This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, fellow Earthlings. I love when we have best of episodes. Each individual topic really is cool and fun to talk about. But when we connect topics that all sort of work under an overarching umbrella, that is one of my favorite things about science, Jen.
Yes, absolutely. And this is going to be a really fun episode to talk about because it's also happening on the exact day. So what topic will we be discussing today?
The best of Earth Day episodes.
The best of Earth Day!
Hey!
Yes! This is so much fun and it's so important in our world. So we have 4 clips of our favorite Earth Day episodes for you to listen to. First, you have episode 35 with Suzanne Simpson. How do you preserve wildlife habitat in a city? Which is very important, don't you think?
It very much is.
Yeah. Episode 212, How Do You Rescue Raptors? With Travis Wilcoxen. That was a really fun
One of
show.
our great episodes.
Yes. How can we help the world's ocean? Which is episode 141 with Steve Creech, who was the executive director and CEO of the Wyland Foundation, and they do some amazing things to help the ocean.
Very much so.
And finally, this I think is one of both of our favorites. Why are whales important? Which is episode 206 with Dr. Emme Devonish. And this is so cool because it talks about something that's kind of in my backyard. The Amelia Island Whale Ambassador is what Dr. Devonish is. And we talk all about whales. Who doesn't love whales?
I'm certainly on that list, and these are all super topics, and it really does cover all of the Earth.
Right. So we hope you enjoy the clips of these. If you want to listen to them, of course, go to our website, solveitforkids.com, or anywhere that you listen to your podcast. And happy Earth Day!
How do you preserve wildlife habitat in a city?
How can we keep the wildlife and ecology and all that other stuff safe in a big city?
That is a great question, isn't it? And one I think kids want to know about, because if you live in a city, you want your wildlife habitat to be as safe as anywhere else.
Absolutely.
So this is just a really cool thing. And we have Suzanne Simpson, who is ecologist and land stewardship director today, to talk to us all about it.
Hey, welcome to Solve It.
Well, howdy, you guys. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is really exciting, and I was mentioning to Suzanne earlier, I live right in the city, and I also live right next to a wildlife sanctuary, so I am really excited to speak to her about what we can do in our backyards to encourage ecology and animals and wildlife and all that stuff.
Exactly. So let's start with, what is a land stewardship director? That sounds like a really important title.
Well, I'm glad it sounds really important. What a land stewardship director is it's somebody who acts as the caretaker of our wild lands and wild habitats. So as for me and myself, I live in a city called Houston, Texas, and I help protect through my job about 14,000 acres of wildlife habitat. Wow. So I need to make sure that I am visiting those areas every year to make sure that the people that have protected those habitats they're being maintained and they're continuing to be high quality habitat for our wildlife and our waters. So that means I get to go out and sometimes stomp in the prairies. Sometimes I get to fall in a swamp. I've been told that sometimes the things that I do for work don't really look much like work at all, which I think makes me very lucky.
That's the best kind of work, yes.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I'd like the fall in the swamp part of your job, but wading through a swamp would be pretty cool.
I'm saying don't knock it till you tried it.
So for those of our listeners that may not know exactly what a habitat is, can you define the term habitat for them?
Sure. Well, a habitat can be any kind of an assemblage or a collection of plants, soil, and animal species that all come together and coexist in a space. Now, a habitat doesn't necessarily have to be thousands and thousands of acres or a national park. We can have things called microhabitats, which can be really simple things that you can create in your backyard. So habitats can range from things like Yosemite and Yellowstone to a native pollinator garden that you just have in your backyard. Anything that promotes the coexistence of plants, soil, and wildlife together.
Wow. I love that idea of a pollinator garden. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That sounds like something that's simple but really fun.
Exactly. And pollinator pathways or native plant gardens are extremely important to wildlife. As a human race, we have become increasingly urban, especially in the United States. More and more people are flocking, pardon the pun, to cities, which means that the wildlife that live in those cities and have lived in those cities for many, many years need refuges to have a safe place to continue to persist. And a way that you can support that is by planting native plants in your backyard and creating what we call a pollinator pathway. A pollinator pathway can be super simple. It can just be 2 or 3 species that you plant in your backyard, but you will be amazed at the response that you'll get from bees and butterflies and all the different species that those help support. So you can create a little micro ecosystem in your backyard just by putting a few plants in there that work well together.
Oh, that's really cool. I know that there's a lot of people here in Florida that have I've seen butterfly gardens and whatever. So talk about, you talked about how wildlife is kind of being shrunk, I guess, because of all of the construction. Is there anything that we can do? I mean, we can't go and, stand in front of bulldozers and say, don't build here, right? I guess you can, but that's not a good plan. So what can we do to help support the wildlife that we know might be displaced?
Well, yeah, you're right. We can't always tie ourselves to an oak tree, but what we can do that is a lot more useful is to help create those kinds of microhabitats in your backyard. I'll give you another example.
Okay.
So one thing that we have here a lot in Texas are tree frogs. Now, tree frogs love to hang out in areas that have a little bit of water, but they also need some shelter. As our habitats are beginning to disappear, we're starting to get those kinds of species displaced. So a really simple thing that you can do in your backyard is just go to your local home improvement store. You can order a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. You hammer that thing into the ground by your native plants, and you will create a PVC pipe refugia for tree frogs in your own backyard. So it's these really simple, very inexpensive, totally doable, perfect quarantine activities that you can do to help extend the wildlife sanctuaries to the areas of your backyard. That's one great thing that you can do to help preserve wildlife habitat in the city.
How do you rescue raptors?
How do you rescue raptors? Oh, this is going to be such an amazing conversation. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the terrific Travis Wilcoxen. He is professor of biology at Millikan University and the president of the board of the Illinois Raptor Center.
Welcome to the show, Travis.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Well, this is going to be such a fun episode because I love to learn all about raptors. Like recently, I've noticed them all over the place. Kind of, there's like a hawk that I see on my house. So I'm curious, as a kid, were you one of those people that noticed all the raptors and the birds around you?
When I was a kid, I noticed all of the animals. And
Oh.
I spent time in the creek behind my house. We oftentimes joke about how I used to just leave a note on the counter when my parents came home from work. It's like a creek, and they could reliably find me at the creek. So I didn't always have a specific interest in birds. Mostly
Okay.
it was sort of fish and reptiles and amphibians.
Okay.
And when I went through college, I started to realize that when you're a scientist, the questions that you're interested in are kind of more important than the animals.
Oh.
And so
Okay.
kind of grew into where my research questions led me to working with birds as well.
That's cool.
Okay.
I
So
like
I gotta
that.
ask, what was one of the questions that sort of detoured you?
Yeah.
So the questions were, how do animals survive diseases in the wild?
Oh. And
okay.
what have you found? Have you found any kind of answers to that?
So we find some really interesting things with raptors in particular, that because they are top predators and they're eating everything below them,
Yes.
they have amazing immune systems against the diseases that, say, other birds don't.
Wow. Really?
Okay.
I didn't
that
know
makes
that.
a lot of sense. When you say it that way, it makes a lot of sense. If they're eating everything below them on the food chain, well, they better be able to handle it on the way in. That's good news. So I want to back up half a step. How did that question lead you more to birds than to reptiles and fish?
Yep. So I started with reptiles, amphibians, and fish, and we were trying to understand, with amphibians in particular, we're trying to understand a new fungus that was wiping out frogs and toads in the late 80s.
Oh.
And I was like, look, I want to do the next step there. I want to understand the immune systems of the frogs and toads.
Okay.
And I applied to graduate school to work with someone who was working in that field, and someone else at that university saw my resume and said, look, I don't know if Frog Guy has any openings in his lab, but I'm a bird guy and I have 4 years of funding and I'll pay for your research and you can ask those same questions in birds.
Whoa. So all of a sudden became bird. We've heard this story from scientists before. Sometimes you go where the money is or the opportunity is, right?
Yes, indeed. And again, when you quickly realize that if you're asking the right questions, you can learn to appreciate different animals that can help you answer those questions. If that's what you're interested in, that's what motivates you to pursue science. It doesn't necessarily matter, for me to say I'm a bird biologist or an ornithologist. I'm a disease ecologist. I study how diseases work in wild populations.
I love that. So let me ask you, for maybe some of the people that don't know, can you define what a raptor is specifically? What kind of birds are they?
Yeah, so those are the birds that have the taloned feet.
Ooh, okay.
And so that is why you have the name raptor carried over from the dinosaurs, right? So the raptorial dinosaurs all had feet with sharp curved claws.
Okay.
And that is what they use to subdue the things that they're eating, to kill the things they're eating so that they can safely eat them and carry them off. Most people will look at a bird like a hawk or a falcon or an owl or an eagle, and they'll see the face and they'll say, oh yeah, big, tough beaks. That's probably what they do their work with. That's not.
Wow.
Okay.
It's the feet. And that's why they carry over that name from the raptors, the dinosaur raptors, is because their feet are shaped the exact same way and used for the same purposes.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. That is very cool. I have seen a documentary. I have it in my planetarium here, and it's called Great Bear Rainforest. And for about 60 seconds in this 45-minute thing, they are showing some bald eagles swooping over a lake. And now I totally understand what you're talking about, because this bald eagle, 2 or 3 of them, are grabbing fish right out of the top of the lake. And one of my favorite scenes has always been one of the bald eagles. He only uses one claw. He's like, I didn't even need the other one. I just got the fish. It seems like such a large appendage based on the size of the bird.
Yes.
Is that typical for all raptors?
Yeah, although there are some that seem like they're a little bit of mismatches. So sometimes you have some raptors that are like larger bodied because they live where it's really cold. But
Oh.
so that heavier body helps them survive the colder weather. But
Right.
they actually eat very small prey. So for instance,
Okay.
there's a hawk called the rough-legged hawk.
Okay.
And
All right.
they primarily live in the Arctic, and they're pretty heavy-bodied, and they have tiny little feet.
Oh,
Whoa.
so they have to find a lot of food.
They eat lemmings.
Oh my gosh.
There are
Okay.
a lot of lemmings in the Arctic.
Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, since you have to eat whatever is available. But one of the cool things I think about raptors too is I just love watching them fly.
Yes.
Right? They kind of glide more, and then it's like they don't flap, they just kind of glide. And then every once in a while you'll see them kind of just lift their wings.
Right.
And so do they have like special kind of shaped bodies to fly farther or anything?
So, I mean, that varies greatly by the raptor. So the ones you're talking about would be that type of flight would be typical of like a red-tailed hawk with their very broad wings, or a bald eagle with their very broad wings.
Okay.
But, we got to consider that raptors also include our smaller hawks like Cooper's hawks that cruise through people's backyards and eat birds at the feeders.
How can we help the world's oceans?
How can we help the world's oceans? What a fabulous question, and I can't wait for this discussion. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
It is never a bad day to talk about the oceans and how we can help them, and we have the perfect guest today for that. We have Mr. Steve Creech, the president of the Wyland Foundation.
Welcome to the show, Steve.
It's great to be here.
We are excited to have you because your organization does so many amazing things for the ocean. But what I want to know is, have you always loved the ocean as a kid? Were you an outdoor kid?
Yes and yes. So I grew up in Los Angeles, but I didn't get to the beach that often. We were kind of inland, but I loved Jacques Cousteau and I loved National Geographic and I loved animals and I read everything I could get my hands on. And I was completely fascinated and consumed by the natural world. And I was a geek. I was that kid that would
good. You have fellow geek people here. Awesome.
You're among friends.
I was a geek, and I would sit with a pile of books around me, picture books, and I would look at everything, and I just loved it. So that's kind of what I'm all about. And then I used to read Scholastic magazine. I'm sure your listeners probably do as well. And I was struck by some of the pictures that I saw. And now I'm an older guy now, but this was in the 1970s. And at that time, you would see things like factories dumping oil and waste and trash into rivers, and it would come out of pipes and it would be really black and yucky and disgusting and stinky and all those things. And I would see this in Scholastic magazine and I would wonder how anybody could let this happen.
Yes.
And, as an adult, I found out the reasons why people could let this happen.
Yes.
But as a kid, it raised a lot of questions because I had a father who was an artist and a mother who was a social worker. And so we had a certain kind of value set. And it was really based on, my parents were always pointing out the beautiful parts of nature and these things that we care about so much, right? So as you can imagine, here I was when I was a 7-year-old kid, and I would look at Scholastic magazine and I would see all of the damage that was being done to our environment. And I would hear about things like rivers catching on fire. And in Los Angeles at that time, we had something called third-degree smog alerts. And I don't know if that happens these days with kids, but back then, cars were a lot dirtier. So in Los Angeles, we would see in summer, the sky would be just thick brown with smog, which was pollutants, and you couldn't breathe, or they wouldn't let you go out for recess on some days. And so all these things kind of added up when I was a kid, and it made me think about what I could do.
Yes.
or how anything
Okay.
could be done to begin with.
Right.
So there was a whole lot of things swirling around my world. And then, like I said, the places where I grew up in LA, it was a suburban area. And then
Right.
my dad worked in a factory. And so I got to know a different side of, I guess, of Los Angeles than what you might read in books and things like that. But then later on, friend of the family took me backpacking up to the high Sierras, and
Wow.
which is a mountain range in California that a lot of kids do not know about, but it's a lot like the Rockies or the Alps, and it's just 6 hours north of where we lived. And I got up there where there were these snow-peaked mountains and beautiful, pristine
Wow.
creeks and rivers and lakes that were sky blue, and you could see to the bottom of it, and beautiful rainbow trout. And I asked my friend, I'm like, why has nobody told me about this? We're close to our house. They said, what is going on? How is this even possible that this place existed? So that kind of became how my start and how I got into the environment to begin with. I wasn't the greatest student, but I wasn't a bad student. And in college, I got a D in biology, and I had the interest, but I wasn't quite connecting the dots. So,
yeah.
But then, I got involved I became a journalist and a newspaper reporter, and I always raised my hand to do the environment stories. And it was just something I always gravitated to. And so that kind of led to this. And so I met Wyland, and then I said, hey, I love what you're doing. I love how you connect with people,
Right.
work that you do with kids and painting and your murals. And I thought it was really fantastic. And I said, I think that I can play a role in what you're doing because I want to do more for the environment. And I was at a crossroads between going to law school or going to work for this crazy artist who paints gigantic murals of whales. And
gorgeous murals. I've seen some of them. Wow.
And so I thought I'll stick around here for a couple of months while I'm making my mind. And so now I've been here 20 years.
Why are whales important?
Why are whales important? Oh my gosh, some of my most favorite creatures on the planet. I think we're gonna have so much fun talking about whales that are like literally in my own backyard. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
I am jealous of that, Jennifer. Today, we have a wonderful guest who is going to help us learn more about it. We have Dr. Emme Devonish. She is, in her daytime job, a leadership and executive coach and consultant. She is also an Amelia Island whale ambassador.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Devonish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff and Jennifer. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you, and we're going to talk about a lot of cool things, especially whales, which are in my own backyard because I live in Jacksonville. So I'm like, wow, they're that close. But what I want to know is, as a kid, were you always interested in whales and like animal conservation?
As a kid, I was always interested in the ocean. And I will say that because I spent a lot of time at the ocean growing up. So it's always been, I love the water. I'm always the happiest when I live by the water. And
Me
through
too.
that connection, I really learned to appreciate nature. And then, all things nature related, hiking, birds, trees.
Exactly.
I don't have any domesticated animals, but I like to see them in their natural habitat.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Nice. So if you don't mind my asking, where did you grow up? And when you went to the ocean, which kid were you? Were you the collecting shells, laying on the beach, or were you always in the water?
I think I was a combination of always being in the water, swimming to take breaks, as well as walking along, the shoreline, collecting shells, but putting them back in. I would rarely pick something up and take it with me because I just like to leave it where it was. And I felt like it had a purpose there, and it wasn't for me to take something away from that beauty. So I like to go and appreciate. Like growing up, I grew up in a lot of different places. So I had lots of opportunities to live by the ocean. I've lived on an island. I've lived places along the coastline. my family traveled a lot. And as an adult, I had the opportunity to both live in California. So I was in Southern California, only 7 minutes from the beach. So that was fantastic.
Wow.
And
Nice.
and I also got my PhD in film studies from the University of Sydney. So I was by the water for several years.
Gosh.
A great place to do your dissertation.
I would imagine, yes. So can you tell us some of the cool ocean creatures that you saw in all of these different places?
Outside of creatures, I really love coral. I think
okay.
it's absolutely gorgeous, right? And that's something I thought was everywhere I went. So it's also surprising to me to see that the coral population has declined because I grew up seeing coral. But I really loved coral. I've seen, dolphins, which is popular here in the United States, and it's popular, especially in Florida. We see dolphins all the time. So it's dolphins. I saw things like unusual fish, like kingfish.
Oh, wow.
So, So, just different looking types of fish and other types of sea life.
Wow.
Okay. Since coral was the first thing you said, when you grew up, did you become a scuba diver to spend more time in the water?
I didn't become a scuba diver, but I swim and snorkel. Yeah. Scuba is sort of, so for me, I have this strange notion that, as a human walking the planet, that my role is to be here on the surfath and maybe a little bit further down, but to leave those further down, leave them alone, and let them have their peace.
Okay.
I can watch National Geographic.
There you go. I'm the same way. I can't scuba because I have an ear issue that doesn't allow me to go further, but I kind of feel the same way as you. I think snorkeling is amazing. So how did you get involved with whales? Because, that's a very specific animal. And, especially I think, what kind of whales do you come here for Amelia Island?
Yeah, so the North Atlantic right whale are the whales that we are involved in. So I first got invited to participate in a writer's retreat called the Metanoia Retreat for Writers and the Right Whale in 2021, in April 2021 on Amelia Island. And so it was the end of the calving season for the whales. But that 4 or 5 day period, we did a lot of writing and a lot of community projects involving the whales. And I just was immediately enamored with the grassroots efforts, how whales are important to us and what I could do to help as a writer. And also because I love Florida so much and I, just kept coming back here. Yeah.
So I think you just said it yourself, but our main question for today is, why are whales important?
Yeah, so whales are really important to our ecosystem. They help us breathe. So they feed on plankton and phytoplankton. And during that photosynthesis process, they, carbonize the carbon dioxide and they release oxygen into the atmosphere. And that's something we all could use a lot more oxygen. So we all know about pollution.
Agreed.
Yes, we all know about climate change. But that's really important. Whales are also important to the ocean itself because they help to regenerate ocean life. And the food sources that they leave after they expire, it's about a 50-year span of resources for other sea life. So, so whales are really important for that reason as well.
Whales and raptors and habitats and oceans. Oh my! Earth Day really does literally cover everything. And any topic we talk about, as long as it gets us to focus on the importance of Earth Day and the importance of taking care of our one and only planet.
Exactly. And honestly, we picked 4, but if you go back and look through all of our episodes, you will see we have a lot of episodes that deal with taking care of our planet, and we talk about penguins, we talk about icebergs one time, and all of these different things. So please feel free to go through all of our previous episodes and take a listen because we have some amazing experts, and we hope that you have an amazing Earth Day and do something to take care of our planet today on your own.
Absolutely. And until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on Solve It for Kids.